Hi guys, it's Jess. Welcome back to my channel, and today I am going to be talking about the very few books I have read in 2020 so far. So if you saw my last video, I was apologising for the fact that I had seemingly dropped off the face of the earth in mid-December and I haven't made a video since, because I was in a very big reading slump amongst other reasons, and it was very difficult for me to find a book that I really enjoyed reading in January, February time. And there were a few books that I tried, and there were a few books that I did like, there were a few books that I DNF'd, and I've not really been in the mood to read, but I've had a few good books and I have finished a number of them, and we're going to talk about them now. So the first book that I read in 2020 was One Day in December by Josie Silver. I planned to read this around Christmas time last year, but because of work and reasons I never got around to it. So January was still kind of festive, you know, we had the New Year celebrations and it was still winter, so it felt like the ideal time to read this book. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to. I'm not a huge fan of contemporary fiction, and it's contemporary romance, which is a genre I don't really touch upon that much, but I really enjoyed it. And I think as well because I was in a very down kind of mood and I was very poorly at the time of reading this, that, you know, anything light and fluffy and kind of happy was gonna suit me just fine at that point, and it made me forget about a lot of things that were bothering me. It's about this girl who sees this guy while she's sat on a bus, and then a year later she meets him again and he turns out to be her best friend's boyfriend at the time, and we follow them throughout the years as their relationship kind of develops, and they get there happy ever after. I don't really remember much about it other than that, but I know that I really enjoyed it and I did rate it 4 stars. I really like Josie Silver's writing style. I think it's very magical at times, and she also is very good at writing very atmospheric scenes as well, which helped, you know, get me into the festive and party spirit of things, as it were. And I just loved all the, you know, sweet and cute little interactions between the main characters, and yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I would definitely recommend it if you were into romance. Following on from that, because I really enjoyed One Day in December and I was in the mood for some more romance, I decided to give 8 White Nights by Andre Aciman a go. Andre Aciman wrote, I don't even know if I'm saying his name right, but anyway, he wrote Call Me By Your Name, which was very popular at the time the film was around, and I read that book. It's about a gay romance, and I didn't like it as much as everybody else did, and I have a lot of issues with Andre Aciman and the way he writes, and it was the same thing with 8 White Nights. I think I read about the first 100 pages and I ended up DNFing it because the writing style is just not for me. It's very flowery and it's very descriptive, and sometimes it felt like he was just rambling on and on about the same thing, and I really just didn't care. That was a shame because the premise sounded really lovely. This guy meets this woman called Clara at a party over the Christmas period, and they have 8 nights that they spend together, and their romance kind of blossoms over that period of those 8 nights. It sounded really intriguing, and I really liked the character of Clara. She sounded like a very quirky, independent, funny woman, but it was just ruined by this constant rambling internal monologue from the main character. And it's a shame because, like I said, I just thought I was going to enjoy it, and I really didn't. So after 100 pages, it was gone, unfortunately. Around March time, I picked up How to Stop Time by Matt Haig. Last year I read The Humans by Matt Haig and it was a 5-star read for me. I really enjoyed it, and it was contemporary fiction, so I wasn't 100% certain that I was going to like it, so I was very surprised when I, read it and enjoyed every second of it. Matt Haig has been on my radar for a while, and since reading The Humans he has become a must read for me. I've wanted to read every single book that he's released because they all sound like things I would enjoy, and I love that he talks about such important things like mental health and life and death and love, and he puts his own spin on things, and he makes you think about the world in a different way, and he makes you see things that you probably wouldn't see before, if that makes sense. But How to Stop Time is all about a man who doesn't age like the rest of us. He ages a lot slower, and so he has lived for hundreds of years. And we basically follow him through different points of his life. The book isn't linear, so it flicks backward and forward from present to past. And we see his life unfold at different time points, and we learn things about his relationship with his mother and his relationship with his wife and the relationship that he had with his child. And one of the plots is that he is searching for his daughter, who is potentially genetically built like him. Again, it was very funny, incredibly witty. Matt Haig, writes his characters so well, and he always gets to the point. He doesn't, dally around with loads of description and ramblings and inner monologues and things like that. He just gets straight to the point. Story is always really well paced, and yeah, I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads, and I don't remember why I didn't give it 5 stars. Either way, it's still a great book and I definitely recommend it. Also in March, I ended up picking up Christopher Eccleston's autobiography, I Love the Bones of You. This book came out just before Christmas last year. I remember when it came out, and there was a lot of hype amongst the Doctor Who fandom about this book because obviously, if you don't know, Christopher Eccleston played the 9th Doctor in Doctor Who when it was rebooted back in 2005. I have a very soft spot for Christopher Eccleston because he was my first Doctor, and I've followed his career since then, and I think he's an incredible actor. And reading this was really surprising, and it's not an easy read. It's a very emotional memoir about growing up in working class Salford and his relationship that he had with his father. Yeah, there were lots of things in this that I didn't know he had been through, and to look at him you wouldn't think that he had been through that kind of thing. He talks a lot about having body dysmorphia and dealing with anorexia while he was trying to become an actor, and he also talks about father's dementia and his decline because of that, and his relationship with his mother as well, which I think is really beautiful. And yeah, it was a very emotional book to read and really eye-opening actually as well, and it really makes you aware that things like eating disorders, body image issues, and all those things that you have to deal with as a girl can also affect men just as much. So it was a very, very important read, and I definitely think people should read this if you want to understand a little bit more about the pressures that men face in the acting industry and how they cope and deal with eating disorders as well. Yeah, I gave it 5 stars. I just thought it was absolutely incredible, and I have a lot of newfound respect for Christopher Eccleston, and I really, really applaud him for being so honest and open and releasing such a wonderful book. Also in March, I picked up a thriller that I have been wanting to read for a while, and that is The Arrangement by Robyn Hardin. I was very apprehensive about this book because I remember reading The Party by Robyn Hardin and I didn't enjoy it. I think I gave that book 2 stars. It just wasn't for me. It was very, very badly written and the story was just so... There was something missing from the story that just didn't have that wow factor, if you know what I mean. So going into this, I wasn't gonna have very many high expectations, but I really enjoyed it. This book follows Natalie, who moves to New York and she's an art student, and she finds herself a sugar daddy to help fund her life in the city, as you do. And this guy is called Gabe and he's this rich lawyer type, and he also has a wife and a daughter, and he's kind of living this secret double life away from them. And we follow them as their relationship develops and it gets very tricky, and there's a few twists and turns at the end which I was kind of expecting but also one that I wasn't, and that's why I gave this book 4 stars. It wasn't a solid 5 just because I did predict some of the things that was gonna happen, and that's fine, you know, like sometimes that's the way it goes, but I did enjoy it and it's definitely an improvement from The Party. So I'm very tempted to give some more of Robyn Hardin's books a go for sure. And also I think why this book appealed to me so much and why I enjoyed it so much was because I was writing about my own sugar daddy type story a while back. It's not what it sounds, trust me, it's not what it sounds. It was going to be a novel, but that's kind of like dead and gone now. But yeah, so that's probably why it appealed to me so much. Anyway, around April time I decided to start working through some of the books that I had been gifted for Christmas, and I picked up The Deathless Girls by Kiran, Millwood, Hargrave. This book has been on my radar for a while and it's a young adult fantasy all about these 2 twin sisters who are travellers and they end up getting kidnapped. They're basically worked up to become the dragon's gifts. He takes girls as gifts, and it's meant to be based around Dracula's brides. I believe that's where the inspiration for this came from, and when I read that I was very excited because, as we all know, I love Dracula. This book was so hard to read because the story just wasn't there for me. I was very, very let down by this book, which is sad because I love everything to do with vampires. I love everything that's inspired by Dracula, but there just wasn't enough vampire stuff in it to keep me interested, and I haven't even finished it. I got like that far into it and I ended up DNFing it, and it's not by any means a terrible book. I like the writing style, I like the characters, I love that there is an LGBTQ plus relationship. We have a relationship in this book between the main character Lil and her friend Mira. So that was really nice because I love anything, you know, that has that kind of representation. So I would definitely recommend this book for that. But it just, the pacing just felt a little bit off. It was a little bit too slow for me, and I was near the end and still no decent vampire stuff had happened. We hadn't even seen the dragon at that point. He had only been mentioned a couple of times, and it just wasn't for me, and I just felt very let down, and yeah, it just really put me in a big slump. And so I don't know what I would rate this. I might go back and read it again when I'm a bit more into it and feeling a bit more like I want to read some young adult fantasy, because, you know, it does have some very good things about it. but at the time it just wasn't for me, unfortunately. After really struggling with reading physical books, I decided to give audiobooks a go because I was still able to do other things that I was interested in while listening to a book, and that really worked for me. And one of the books that I did that with was I Never Said I Loved You by Rhik Samadder. So Rhik Samadder is an actor, broadcaster and writer, and I've not really been aware of him before now, but I've seen this book floating around on the internet, and some people that I know have recommended it and said they really enjoyed it. It's a memoir about his life growing up as a British Asian, and he talks about some of the experiences that he has had to deal with, such as eating disorders and suicide and sexual abuse and things affecting his family and his father's mental health in particular, and his father's death as well. And it's a very emotional read, and it's very, very important as well. And I definitely think if you're a British Asian, it's something that you will be able to connect to. And he also made a lot of very important points about racial inequalities within this country, which at this moment in time, given the current circumstances in the world, that's a very important thing to be reading about right now and to be educating ourselves about. So that was very, very interesting to hear as well. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed listening to this. I would definitely recommend it, and I would definitely seek out some more of his writing in the future. The last audiobook that I listened to and the last book that I have finished so far is Why I Am No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Reni Eddo-Lodge. So this book has been on my TBR for at least a year or so now, but I never really got round to reading it, and I'm glad that I have finally taken the time to sit down and listen to it, especially given the current circumstances within the world and the Black Lives Matter movement. It's a very important book, and it's a book that I think everybody should be reading right now, because I learned so many things that I never knew were. I learned a lot about racial inequality and how, as a white person, I am more likely to be more successful than a black person. And I also learned a lot about class and how, you know, if you're working class and you're black, you're more likely to stay working class than if you are working class and white, which is something that I've never considered. Coming from a working class background, I always assumed it affected everybody the same regardless of skin colour, and clearly that's not the case. I also learned a little bit about white colonialism and the slave trade and the abolition of the slave trade. I found that very interesting, and I would definitely like to delve into that a little bit more, considering that was something that I never got taught about in school. It just doesn't happen over here. Yeah, it was a very eye-opening read, and there is so much about this book that I could talk about, but the one thing that I took away from it was that we really need to, as white people, we really need to make sure that we educate ourselves and listen to black people and listen to their experiences. And we can be a voice for them, you know, we can be a voice for racial inequality, and we can, you know, speak about it, and we shouldn't be afraid to call people out on the things that they say and do, and we also shouldn't be afraid to call ourselves out. I think that's something that a lot of us have a big fear of doing, is holding ourselves accountable for making mistakes. You know, we're human, we make mistakes, we do say the wrong things, and as white people we are brought up in a society that is unfortunately racist. And I definitely know that when I was a kid, I grew up in a town that was very xenophobic, and it was always okay to use these racial slurs and things like that, because my parents did it, my friends did it, it was just the norm. And obviously just because it's the norm doesn't mean it's okay. And knowing that I did that when I was younger, it does make me feel very embarrassed. But, you know, I've learned from it and I know not to do it, and I know to call people out on it. So that's the one thing that I took away from it. And no matter, you know, how small of a thing it is, as long as we're constantly, you know, doing things to support the movement and to end racism, then we should reach that end goal. So I gave this book 5 stars. Please go and read it if you haven't already, and make sure you get your friends to read it and your family to read it, because it is definitely a very good book, very informative. Okay guys, so that's the end of this video, and I tried to keep it as short as possible. I do ramble, I know, but it's very nice to be back talking about books, and I'm really looking forward to getting my list of books that I have read this year way up to the top. I'm excited to get back into reading. I have a few books that I'm currently reading right now that I am really enjoying, and I can't wait to talk to you guys about them. I can't wait to just ramble on about every single book that I have read, and every single book that I love, and every single book that I want to read, and all the books that I have bought, because I have so many. But if you have read any of these books that I have mentioned in this video today, please leave a comment down below letting me know what you thought about it, because I would love to know, and I would love to start some bookish conversations with you all. If you have any book recommendations for me, any books about race, any thrillers, any other YA fantasy vampire book that you think I would like, pop them in the comments below and I will be sure to check them out. I always appreciate recommendations. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please like, please subscribe, and I promise I will be back with another video very shortly. Bye guys!